Hello everybody. You're tuning with me, Jarron. I'm from Unit 13. That's a master's unit. Today we're going to go on a tour of the Bartlett Summer Show, and it's called The Form of Home Living. I think this is really inspired by what I think is one of the truly inescapable experiences that is shared by everyone, and that is our ability to transform a housing unit into a home. So this tour sort of wants to provide some kind of insight into the very perennial question, right? What is the role of the architect in making a home? It sort of presupposes that housing is not necessarily a problem that needs to be solved. It's more of an experimental speculation about different ways of living. So I think the following projects we're going to look at have very different approaches and ideas that I think can look at housing. They approach housing from very different perspectives, and they develop very specific design approaches, and they manifest themselves into a very different form, which is why it's called the form housing. So here's the rundown for today. We're going to be looking at different units, different years, and each one's going to have a very different take on the housing conversation. The four projects, the first one is inspired by the social phenomenon of overlooking, and it uses that as a tool to deliver more dense, more integrated communities. The second project, it has a low critique on listed historic land and sees that as a very inflexible typology, and it will suggest a way to open them up to become more flexible, more reactive housing. The third one out of four is it studies very mundane domestic practices, right? Like doing your laundry, for instance, and it turns out as an opportunity to make more sustainable social housing. Very big word there. And the last one engages with the child's imagination and uses it as a lens to reinvigorate neglected estates, right? So as you remember, this tour is called The Form of Housing, because we're going to see how these ideas manifest themselves into some form of spatial reality. These are just thoughts, you know. The nature of housing is that everyone is a sort of an expert in their own way, because, you know, everyone's an expert in the way that they live. So during this tour, if the projects pique some kind of interest, some ideas, comments, questions, other of those synonyms, drop it down to the comment section below. I will be around to answer as much of it as I can. There are no wrong questions. You can ask what software they use, how it was done, what the students are currently up to, anything you like, I'll be right there. All right, with that, let's jump right into our first project. I think you can already see on the screen, there's this little orange background. This is a project by Jonas. He is fourth year in Unit 13, and his project is called The Responsive City. Very quickly about this project, the brief was to relook at some of London's famous housing estates and think about what kind of new housing utopias we can dream about now. So this is sited in Alton's estate. For those of you who are not familiar, that's a very large council estate built in the 50s in southwest London. The big image here, the one with the orange sky, I think he was, when I was in conversation with him, he was, one of the things that he observed about this area in Alton's estate was this idea of a very physical disconnection between its inhabitants. But one of the things that transcends that physical distance is the idea of overlooking. And you know, it's a bit mysterious about it. It's not just what you can see, it's about what you're also not seeing. So to translate that architecturally, overlooking is really the idea of transparency, which is why in this picture you can sort of see that things are a bit more transparent. It sort of gives the idea, it's a bit mysterious, it's a bit transparent. Moving on, have a look at this. I think this is a video. Let's see if we can get it to play. I really hope that it's playing on your screen as well as it is on mine. This video is about physical boundaries, and he's looking at that in a master plan. So he used this software called Grasshopper. For those of you who don't know, Grasshopper is a parametric plugin that you can have in your 3D software called Rhino. And he input like the viewer's viewing tone, and it sort of shows how the estate is ever changing based on where one person is looking at any given time. So the estate is never just understood as a model of just one dwelling, but it's the relationships they share with each other. I think the challenge is really for him was to densify while still keeping things very open. This is a model that he made. I think he made this during the pandemic lockdown. And I think for him, it was using this idea of overlooking or transparency and translating that into a material. And for the material, he chose glass. So this entire house, which is one small dwelling in the entire master plan, is made completely out of glass. Well, in this case, I think it was 3D printed. It's got a central core and little skin around it. This came from a script in Grasshopper. So the housing shape, you would notice, has got all these very funky shapes. Each of these houses in the master plan is different. It's based on where the neighbor is in relation to that and where all the viewing cones are. So some places are a bit more opaque and some are less. You would see here in this next image, it's called a transparent community. So it isn't so much about just when you do something in isolation, it's about the entire community. When you do it in a master plan, if you approach housing from a master plan kind of way, then you can start to plan out where it needs to have more distance, where it needs to have less. This is also a lot about the atmospheric qualities. Each house is sort of surrounded by, the garden, and then the shadow sort of indicates where the neighbor is. So each house shape is really quite interdependent on the neighbor's shading and view cones. Ooh, another video. Yeah, this video is really about the inhabitational qualities, Some bits are a bit more opaque, some a bit more transparent. All right. And I think that's Alton Estate in the background. Oh, here's a little section. I'm going to go through it very slowly. I like this project a lot, I think, because you always hear in conversations about housing on social media, right? They always want a desire for like more openness in an estate, for security reasons and such. But this project really shows that you can densify reading without needing to sacrifice privacy. All right. Interesting to note as well, for 4th years in the master's units, they have to do a module called design realization, which is to take the sort of ideas and sort of produce that in a very thick document, very technical elements of delivery. So which is why you start to see very detailed sections here. All right, so you can check out more about this project we'll have a link below, and if you want to get in contact with him as well. All right, let's jump to the next project. Ooh. This one is mine. This is Jarron. This is my project. Also in Unit 13, I am 4th year, and it's called Extending Alexandria Estate. So it also responds to the same unit brief as Jonas's, which is a critique on London's housing estates, famous housing estates, especially in the sort of post-war boom. This is London's largest listed estate. This is Alexandria Estate in Camden. For those of you who haven't been, go and check it out. It's an amazing estate done by an architect called Neil Brown, who's the winner of 2018's Freeburg Gold Medal. He wrote a manifesto, which I thought was very interesting, back in his heyday, called Form of Housing. And he built it to supply as much houses as possible in the quickest amount of, to have more diversity in terms of income. So everybody from all walks of life stays in the same place. So his 3 keywords for that kind of housing was anonymous, cellular, and repetitive. So that was the kind of things that they needed back then. But then I think maybe in this image, it starts to challenge that form of housing. And it sort of says that maybe in a modern utopia, we shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all scheme. It should be, maybe it's an expression of the individual households being treated, even though that there are flats. So this image sort of suggests that tenants within Alexandria Estate, can rearrange their listed elements, and the estate becomes a series of these growing flats at the same time. We need to treat each flat as independently, although as part of a collective. All right. There's a little, it's about the flats starting off from Alexandria Estate and then extending from Alexandria Estate. I call them Alextensions. And it's about being able to unfold, stretch, and lift up to react to the tenants' needs according to their means. I think a lot also the housing conversation in the UK is about addressing the future proofing of housing estates, right? And it seems to be a case of finding a new shell to live in when the old one no longer fits. But in this way, you're able to take the very permanent nature of the home that's conventionally designed to outlive its tenants, and you make it more flexible. So that was the first bit of the project. And the second part of the project, it was relocated to a different site. And you realize that the conversation is a lot more about, I'm not sure if it's written here, I'm not sure if you can see it. The question is about what is homemaking then, right? And so to me, homemaking is about this process of constantly renewing and readapting the built environment. And this is really what this section is about. You've got a bit of a scaffold thing going on, right? Maybe the architect designs the sort of scaffold bits and the tenants decide what the infill is going to be like. And then you can alter your living arrangements to suit your different needs based on whatever income you have. This is a sort of, I'm not sure if you can see the entire thing. This large axonometric thing is show a bit more of the habitational qualities, and it's a community that you can trade space with each other. So you only pay for the amount that you use. This way, you can convert your house. Maybe, if you wanted to have a home office, you can convert a bit of that into a home office. Everything is done using dry fixtures, so it's very easy to assemble. You don't have to have a lot of very difficult cranes and construction things coming in. Maybe you want to have a larger bathroom, or maybe you want to sell off some of the space. You want to unlock some of the equity in your largest asset, right, your house. Maybe when your children move out of the house, you can sell a bit of that. So it's about this modularization of space. Hawkins Brown actually did a very good piece called The Emperor's New Housing. It sort of resonates with this image as well. It's about this modularization of space. It's only paying for what you need. But it's good because I think that it's about building a community that is actively engaged in what the living conditions are like. This is sort of a graphic about how these modules are brought. They're fabricated on site, they're brought up to the flat by the tenants, and they're installed rather than constructed using, it's done using like a curtain wall technique. And this is the last image. So in this new utopia, unlike the housing that we needed in the post-war recovery, maybe it's about tenants taking more control of their housing arrangements and allowing them to be part of the process and altering it to fit their needs, according to their means. It's got a bit of an ephemeral quality about it as well, because the landscape is constantly changing, which is why you have all these things between like day and night, and nothing is really the same. You can, 10 years in this housing estate will look very different from when it started. Even if you have not just on domestic scale, but like these giant things start to appear. Maybe the council decides that you want to have a future drone landing pad. When Amazon does its drone deliveries, and you start to build it, or you have different amenities. All right, I think that's the end of this one. Yeah, let's jump on to the next project. Let me see where it is. Here we go. We're now in Unit 22. We've changed units, but we're going to be looking at some fifth-year students now. This is UT, and this project is called Harlow Housing, E-Cooperative, Rethinking Our Gross Domestic Practices. This one was about sustainability. The site is based in this place called Terminus House. It's in Harlow, in Essex. It's a tower block, and the first image here is about the concept of sustainability, where you look at it from a very holistic approach, and it's about resource sharing quite specifically in this one. So the different colored bits are about the different stakeholders I would say. I think sustainable is a word that's thrown around a lot and it usually refers to a very nebulous variety. But this one I think is quite specific in saying that it's about the shared economy within the existing infrastructure, as opposed to doing a new build. By the way, in every of these projects as well, you would see the student and the email contact if you wanted to get in touch. So the second image, which is actually a video, breaks down the shared domestic experiences and practices, quite specifically doing laundry. He breaks it down and rewrites the process to be more socially inclusive. And it's this idea of resource sharing. You know, for those of you know what a circular economy is, you know, that starts to feed into that as well. One man's waste becomes another man's resource. Often you hear about sustainability talked about in urban planning, but when UT does it, you know, he does it in a model. He's in one of the clips here. It's a physical model that he's made. Very often we talk about sustainability, it's all about diagrams, but then when you start to make it as a model, then like the viewer starts to visually connect things in his mind, like a diagram, except in a spatial form. Putting a new spin on laundry, that's a good name. I think this is a video as well, it's a scrolling video. So likewise for this section and all these color in moments, you know, you start to get more of the inhabitational qualities of the estate and a bit more of the material. It's a CL cross-laminated timber sort of infrastructure that is placed on top of the existing building. Very, very detailed as well. Okay. Wow, look at that. This one's a little bit more about the habitational qualities of this new cooperative estate. It's about the community sort of coming together on in these little pockets of space. I actually like that this doesn't propose a sort of new built white paper, perfect utopia sort of proposal, but it's a way to pick off from where you are right now. It kind of reminds me as well of this scheme by Lacaton and Vassal in Bordeaux. It's got like this, it uses the embodied energy that's put in the existing building, and then you improve on it by building a second layer almost on top of it. And it's got, in this case, it's got this timber structure that's placed as a second inhabitable second layer. It's very, very detailed. I love it. You start to see like the smaller narratives and groups of people clustering together. And I think it's really trying to sell this image that it's about resource sharing. I think especially as well when you look at lower income housing, I think for UT he was talking a lot about how when people come together for resource sharing, then you know you can start to afford a lot more of the building's amenities. All right, I think that's it. UC is in the graduating cohort, like all the fifth years, and they're all looking for job opportunities. So if you want to get in touch, his email will be in the link below, but it's also on his page. So do go ahead and check it out. Yeah, that's great. With that, I think that brings us to the last one. This is another fifth year in the same unit, unit 22. This is by Janis Ho, and it's called Template Community: How to Design a Caring Neighborhood. It's like a manual. Right off the bat, it's looking very playful already. Oh yeah, Unit 22, the brief was about the caring city. And I think for Janis, it was kind of looking at how the city can be quite uncaring towards its children. I was actually reading this book quite recently. It's called Walkable Cities by Jeff Speck, and he was talking about how you can tell a city is happy when you start to see children playing on the street. And I think this is, you can already see it, like these in-between streets are all very pedestrianized, you have children playing. It's really nice. A little bit of background about where this is sited. It's based in the suburban Liverpool post-industrial area. And it's terrace housing, and this axonometric cutaway. It's quite nice because you can get a bit of the view from the top, like what's going on in the master plan, but then also the smaller and habitational quality that's going on, but also a bit of the elevation, how it looks like from these in-between streets. Yeah. So yeah, this project is really thinking about if you want to build good communities, you have to start with the children, And that makes a lot of sense when we look at these models as well, because this is on a very dollhouse 1:25 scale. It just looks already like you're playing with it. And there's this very element of fun about it as well. I think it's interesting to note as well for Janis. In her thesis, she wrote about the integration of children within the design and building process when it comes to delivering housing. She actually participated in a couple of workshops exploring the way children play and understanding space as seen from the lens of the child's imagination. And she's working with like the IRB and some other companies, engaging with children between 6 to 12. I think that seems to become a big reference back into this sort of dollhouse model, when it's made from all these modular elements that are assembled in a very like self-built water seagull way. This is a little graphic narrative about the very inhabitational qualities. It's almost like the site is producing like a giant walk-in dollhouse. Everything is so very colorfully done. And it's also about how the entire community can become a giant adventure playground as well. Janis spent a lot of time looking at adventure playgrounds. And, I think even in this scheme, you can start to see that like things like the party walls are lowered so that, you let the children roam freely around and create adventures. Just right. Hi, we're back. Sorry, there was a bit of a technical hiccup, but we are back to this tour, the form of housing. We're down to our last project. This is by Janis. Janis is also in her fifth year, part of Unit 22. And this project is called Play to Community: How to Design a Caring Neighborhood. It's like a manual. Right off the bat, it's looking very playful already. Just a quick background about this project. Unit 22's brief was about a caring city and how the city, I think for Janis especially, can be very uncaring towards its children. I was actually reading this book quite recently by Jeff Stack, and it's called about Walkable Cities, I think. And he was talking about how if you know a city is happy or is good when you start to see the children playing on the street. So already in this first image, you can start to see the in-between alleyways and streets being a bit more pedestrianized with children playing around. This site is based in suburban Liverpool. It's a bit of a post-industrial area. And this very detailed axonometric cutaway, already gives you this sense of like a master plan. But you can also start to see the inhabitation here, the individual stories that are going on with all its inhabitants. And you can also start as well, which is how it looks like from the street. So for this project, I think what was very important for Janis is that I think if you want to build good communities, you start with the children. Janis has also won a distinction for her master's program. So I think it's also interesting to note that for Janis, I think as she was doing this design thesis, she was writing on the integration of children within the design and building process when it comes to delivering housing. She participated in a couple of workshops exploring, the way children play and understand space. She worked, I think, with RIB and a couple of other companies with children between 6 to 12. And you can sort of see that starting to feed back into this model that she's made, at a very dollhouse scale. She's got this little hand that seems to be like putting elements in. I know that this was supposed to be done in a very self-built way, and I think the proposal is that is kind of having children co-build their spaces as well. It also helps, I think, when you have these house elements and you start to really explore how each of the building can start to become play spaces as well. Because when you see things through the lens of a child, everything becomes quite different from the way architects or grown-ups necessarily look at space. This is a day in the life of a family at Webster Triangle. That's the site. It's a lot about these inhabitational qualities, almost like a walk-in dollhouse. Janis also visited a lot of adventure playgrounds. So in this scheme, I think you can start to see already that the entire community starts to become like one giant adventure playground. This idea of this narrative and the adventure having a sort of story to it. So we can sort of follow along what's going on with its inhabitants. Yeah, things like lowering the party walls and proposing a community center, which is somewhere in here, where the children can sort of work with the youth of the estate, and they co-build like adventure playgrounds, and they create the entire neighborhood for themselves. This is a very wonderfully colored plan. There's a lot to read about children playing, gaining more independence. I think there's also a bit to talk about where the adventure starts and where education for them also comes hand in hand, and how they're all interlinked with each other. Again, with the sort of walk-in dollhouse environment, we start to see these models that were made during the pandemic lockdown start to play into the narrative as well. If you wanted to know how Janis made all of these drawings or models, feel free to comment in the comment section below, and I'll be around to answer that as well. So this is a little gif about how this underutilized car park starts to form up in a very self-built way and the communities start to develop. I think I really like this project because very often in the design process, there is an underrepresentation for its non-paying users. So this project really learns from the nature of children playing, especially when it comes to integrating it with a high level of participation in the RABA work stages, whether it's in consultation, general awareness, or even in like construction. I could look at this one for a while because it's just so many stories going on. You can sort of see the streets and how they've like transformed like the very something for vehicles just now for its inhabitants. All these very playful spaces start to form. All right, I think with that, it sums up our work for today. So what did you think of these projects? What did you, are you involved in your community building up any of your housing estates? Are you building your own house? Are you an architect looking at master planning of these housing estates? You know, what kind of things do you have to contribute to this never-ending conversation about housing? If you've got your own critique or interesting ideas, or you want to know what kind of software was being used, you want to know how people did this and that, let us know in the comment section below, and I will be around to react and answer. The internet connection is dying, so I'm going to sign out right now. Goodbye.